Hello. Today we're going to talk about the neuroglial and motor neurons. So this image might look familiar to you from when we studied tissues, nervous tissue, all the way back in our very first unit. These darker structures right here are neurons. So neuron, neuron, neuron. And then all of these like little teeny, looks just kind of like orange blobs all through there, those are glial cells. So like little cells that support the neurons and do other important things. So our goal is to understand both of these today. Let's talk about what makes neurons special, like special characteristics. Number one thing that comes to mind is they can send nerve impulses. They're able to transmit electrical signals. Other weird things that you're probably aware of are the fact that they don't do mitosis. They do not do cell division. So that means that when you injure a neuron, you're out of luck. You're not going to be able to replace it. Neurons also live a long time, like they typically live our entire lifetime. And they're really kind of particular. They have a high metabolism, which means they constantly need glucose and oxygen to be able to make ATP and live. Pause the video a second and draw a motor neuron. Hopefully you came up with something like this. Neurons have different structures, but this is the generic structure of a motor neuron, and it has a cell body. See the nucleus and all of the normal organelles that you would find in the cell. And then it also has processes that stick off of it. So these kind of shorter processes near the top are called dendrites, and they receive incoming signals from cells. And then there's one long process called the axon, and then the end of the axon splits off into branches called axon terminals. This might sound familiar to you because we looked at the neuromuscular junction, which is where these axon terminals met with the muscle tissue. So this picture illustrates this well, that the dendrites would pick up a signal, and then the signal would be conducted all the way down the axon and then out the axon terminals, and then the dendrites of the next neuron are going to pick that up and then send it all the way down the axon and out the axon terminals, and then the dendrites of the next neuron would pick that up, and so on and so forth until we get all the way through. So now let's take a specific look at the glial cells. We're going to talk about 6 different ones, and some of them are found in the central nervous system, CNS, and some of them are found in the peripheral nervous system, the PNS. And as we're going through them, I want us to really focus on the structure and the function. So starting with astrocytes. Astro means star, so they're named after their kind of like star shape here. And they are the most abundant and versatile cell in the central nervous system. And when I look at this, something I notice is that it has long processes, and they're attaching to a yellow nerve right here, and they're also attaching to a red capillary. Capillaries carry blood, and they're also responsible for exchanging nutrients and wastes, like they drop off oxygen and pick up CO2. So the astrocyte is actually helping to determine the permeability of the capillary. So if we follow a little process, it kind of like branches out into a larger foot, and then here's another foot of the astrocyte. So that little gap right there, that is where the waste products and the nutrients are able to diffuse. So its structure is to literally like grasp onto the capillary and control what comes out. The astrocyte also helps pass nutrients from the capillary to the neuron. So like you could imagine like nutrients are going to go here, they're going to travel through the astrocyte and then get back over here to the neuron. They're also attached to the nerves just to really help like support them and provide a scaffolding. Microglial cells. So they are smaller than all the other ones, microglial. And when I look at them, I notice that it looks kind of like the astrocytes, but there are way more processes on the processes. Like look at all these little thorns that are branching off everywhere. Also, the processes are long and slender. Like look at the astrocyte, it's thicker and closer together. The microglial cells processes are longer and they stick out more. This is going to allow the microglial cell to touch nearby cells and it actually monitors their health. And if it finds, like if it senses that a neuron that it's touching is sick, the microglial cell can actually migrate to that neuron and basically do phagocytosis, which is where it will eat the dead cell. This is important because we don't really have, like the immune system doesn't really function in the brain because the cells can't enter our central nervous system. So the microglial cells are like an honorary part of the nervous system. Epidermal cells. These are glial cells. Like these are nervous tissue. That's really weird because when we look at them, like I don't know about you, but like that looks like columnar epithelial tissue. But nope, these are like columnar nervous cells. They have a nucleus and they also have cilia sticking out the end. Cilia are kind of like little pieces of hair or it's kind of like I don't know what you call them, but like the fins on a jellyfish that like move back and forth. So these ependymal cells actually produce the cerebrospinal fluid. So the whole brain and the spinal cord, the central nervous system, is kind of like floating in a fluid called cerebrospinal fluid. It helps protect it and cushion it. And the ependymal cells make that cerebrospinal fluid. And they also beat their cilia to be able to circulate it around. So it's like they move the cerebrospinal fluid around the central nervous system. Oligodendrocytes. This is a really weird looking nerve cell. So we can see its cell body, but then it's like, where are the processes? If we follow one out, do you see how it's like rolled up over here? So oligodendrocytes literally take their processes and wrap them around neurons. Like if you could imagine you have a straw and a ribbon and you're wrapping the ribbon around the straw so it forms lots of layers, that's what the oligodendrocyte is doing. This forms an insulating covering, kind of like how electrical wires are often in some sort of like insulation, and it actually helps the nerve impulse be able to travel faster. Now we're going to talk about the cells in the peripheral nervous system, which consists of the cranial nerves and the spinal cells. So satellite cells are up here. They're these purple cells that are surrounding the cell body of a neuron. And we think they're pretty similar to astrocytes. So they're doing a lot of like supporting and scaffolding of neurons. And then down here are Schwann cells. And you might be thinking like, hey, aren't those oligodendrocytes? You would be right, except since they're in the PNS, we call them Schwann cells. So Schwann cells wrap their process around nerves in the PNS and form an insulating myelin sheath. I want to recommend that you watch this video because it shows them in action. And please let me know what questions you have.